When you think of mob bosses, your mind probably jumps to guys like Al Capone, John Gotti, or Lucky Luciano. You know, the flashy ones. The guys who couldn't wait to see their mugs in the newspaper. Now today, I'm going to tell you about a different kind of crime lord. A guy who stood just 5 feet 2 inches tall, yet he cast a shadow so large it covered everything. From the garment district all the way to Hollywood. Guy's name was Tommy Lucchese. They called him Three Fingers Brown because he was missing a couple digits on his right hand. But now let me tell you something. What he lacked in fingers, he made up for in brains and ambition. For more than 40 years, Tommy Lucchese was one of the most powerful men in organized crime. He built a small bootlegging crew into one of the 5 families of New York. And he did it all while flying completely under the radar. No flashy suits, no headline-grabbing arrests, no FBI Most Wanted posters, just pure, calculated power wielded from the shadows. While other mob bosses were busy getting their pictures in the papers, Lucchese was making connections. He built relationships with judges, he courted politicians, and he cultivated union leaders. This guy had reach. His influence stretched from the New York sweatshops all the way to the glitzy studios of Hollywood. He had his hands in labor unions. He controlled clothing factories. He owned trucking companies. He even influenced the entertainment industry. So Tommy Lucchese just didn't run rackets. He built legitimate business empires that are still standing today. So now how does a Sicilian immigrant with a 3rd-grade education become so successful? How does a guy with a mangled hand rise to the top? And how does someone reign longer than almost any other mob boss in American history? And how did he manage to die peacefully in his bed when a lot of his fellow Mafia guys met more violent ends? Welcome to Apex Crime Lords. Today we're diving into the remarkable story of Tommy Three-Finger Lucchese, the little boss who built an empire without ever becoming a household name. Warning. The following video is meant for educational purposes only and should not be taken otherwise. Apex Crime Lords does not condone, encourage, or glorify the actions of the individuals covered in this program. Viewer discretion is advised. Gaetano Lucchese was born on December 1st, 1899, in Palermo, Sicily. His family wanted a better life. They wanted to escape the poverty of Sicily, and they wanted to leave the corruption of their homeland behind. In 1911, when Tommy was just 11 years old, his family packed up everything they owned and set sail for America. They landed at Ellis Island with dreams as big as their suitcases were small. The Lucchese family settled in East Harlem. Back then, it was a bustling neighborhood full of Italian immigrants. Young Gaetano, who would later be known as Tommy, had to grow up fast. With just a 3rd-grade education, he went to work in a machine shop to help support his family. Now this is where Tommy's story takes its first dramatic turn. One day at the machine shop, 15-year-old Tommy had an accident. Changed his life forever. A cutting machine sliced off his right thumb. It took part of his index finger too, and his middle finger was severely damaged. This left him with just 2 fully functioning fingers on his right hand. In the tough streets of East Harlem, something like that could have been the end of the road for a young immigrant. But for Tommy, it was just the beginning. He turned those missing digits into his nickname, Three-Finger Brown. It was a nod to the famous baseball pitcher, Mordecai Brown. That guy also had a deformed hand. And teenage Tommy quickly realized that legitimate work wasn't going to get him where he wanted to go. So he started hanging around with the local tough guys and graduated from petty theft to auto theft. He got really good at boosting cars. So good, he caught the attention of the big boys. In his late teens, Tommy was running the 107th Street Gang, and this crew was led by none other than Charlie Lucky Luciano. And these guys weren't just street punks. They were the up-and-coming stars of the underworld. Luciano saw something special in the ambitious young man with the mangled hand. He saw that Tommy was smart, and the kid had a level head. And most importantly, he was loyal. These were rare qualities in their line of work. But Tommy's early career hit a speed bump in 1921 when he was arrested for auto theft. The police had finally caught up with his car-stealing operation. Tommy was convicted and sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in Sing Sing prison. Now, most guys would have seen this as a major setback, but Tommy saw it as an opportunity for networking. While in prison, he met future mob bosses, a guy like Vito Genovese, He formed some connections there. These would serve him well in the years to come. When he got out in 1925, Tommy Lucchese was ready to apply everything he'd learned and take his place in the rapidly evolving world of organized crime. When Tommy Lucchese stepped out of Sing Sing in 1925, the underworld was in the middle of a major shakeup. Prohibition had turned small-time gangs into wealthy criminal organizations. The old-school Mustache Petes, the first generation of Mafia bosses, were losing ground to younger, more Americanized gangsters like Lucky Luciano. Tommy aligned himself with Luciano and a group of ambitious young mobsters who had big plans for the future of organized crime. He quickly proved his value during the Castelmarese War, a bloody mob conflict that ranged from 1930 to 1931. When the dust settled, Tommy emerged as a key player. He was essential to Luciano's new vision for organized crime in America. In 1931, Luciano orchestrated a massive power move. It would later be known as the Night of Sicilian Vespers. With one coordinated strike, Luciano's allies took action. They permanently canceled the subscriptions of dozens of old-school mafia bosses. These hits happened all across the country. This power move cleared the way for a new and more modern approach to organized crime. Luciano formed the Commission. This was a governing body for organized crime. It included the 5 New York crime families, and the Chicago outfit got a seat too. And guess who got a seat at that exclusive table? Our boy Tommy. At just 34 years old, Tommy Lucchese was now on the board of directors of American organized crime. But Tommy's big break came when Gaetano Gagliano, head of what would later be known as the Lucchese crime family, took a liking to the guy. Gagliano made Tommy his underboss, basically the second in command. For the next 20 years, Tommy learned the ropes from Gagliano. The boss was known for running a tight operation. He kept a low profile. He focused on making money rather than making headlines. While other mobsters were living large and attracting attention, Tommy was studying the garment industry, labor unions, and legitimate businesses. This guy was playing the long game. When Gagliano passed away in 1953, Tommy Lucchese, now 53 years old, stepped into the top position without any opposition. I mean, this was one of the smoothest leadership transitions in Mafia history. No power struggles, no bloodshed, just a well-respected leader taking his rightful place. Under Tommy's leadership, what would now be called the Lucchese crime family thrived like never before. He expanded their operations beyond their traditional rackets. He moved into clothing manufacturing. He invested in trucking. He bought up real estate. Tommy understood something that a lot of his contemporaries just didn't get. Real power wasn't in being feared, it was being connected. And oh boy, was Tommy ever connected. Now what made Tommy Lucchese different from other mob bosses was his approach to power. While guys like Albert Anastasia were known for their violent tempers, Tommy was known for his strategic mind. He preferred making allies to making enemies. His connections were everywhere in New York society. Tommy had judges in his pocket, politicians on his payroll, and union leaders at his beck and call. This guy wasn't just the boss of criminals, he was a power broker. One of Tommy's most valuable relationships was with Tammany Hall, the Democratic political machine that controlled New York City politics. He built a connection with Carmine DeSapio. The guy was the last powerful boss of Tammany Hall. It was through him Tommy influenced judicial appointments. He had a say in government contracts. He could even impact political careers. If you wanted to be a judge in certain parts of New York, you needed Tommy's blessing. And his influence didn't stop at the city limits. Tommy knew important people in Washington, too. He cultivated relationships with national political figures. Congressman Alfred E. Santangelo was one of them. He even supported John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign. But the guy was smart enough to keep that connection well hidden. In the business world, Tommy's power center was the garment district. You see, Tommy controlled the truckers' union. This gave him serious power. He could shut down deliveries to any clothing manufacturer who didn't play ball. So that gave him incredible leverage in an industry that was vital to New York's economy. And he used this leverage to build legitimate businesses that made millions. Tommy owned pieces of a lot of different businesses. He had clothing factories, he controlled trucking companies, and he invested in real estate developments. By the 1950s, he was as much a businessman as he was a mobster. But now perhaps Tommy's most surprising power base was in Hollywood. Through his associate Johnny Roselli, Tommy had significant influence in the movie industry. He helped secure financing for films. He resolved labor disputes on movie sets. He even had a say in casting decisions. Now, there are persistent rumors that Tommy had a hand in getting his friend Frank Sinatra the career-saving role of Angelo Maggio in From Here to Eternity. I mean, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what's clear is that Tommy's reach extended from the streets of New York all the way to the star-studded hills of Hollywood. But now here's what really sets Tommy apart: his ability to avoid attention. You got other mob bosses who are getting their pictures in the paper and spending time in jail. But now Tommy stayed pretty much untouched by law enforcement. He had a criminal career spanning over 40 years. But he was only arrested twice. Once for the auto theft thing that sent him to Sing Sing, and once on a gambling charge that was quickly dismissed. He maintained a modest home in Long Island. He drove a pretty unremarkable car, and he dressed kinda plain. His neighbors never suspected a thing. To them, he was just a successful businessman. They noticed he was pretty generous to local charities. Tommy understood what many flashier gangsters just didn't get: that true power operates best from the shadows. By the mid-1960s, Tommy Lucchese was at the peak of his power. His influence touched everything. His family was making serious money. They were one of the most profitable crews in the Mafia. They had interest in garment manufacturing. They controlled airport services at the newly built JFK International Airport. I mean, they had their hands in everything. Lucchese had survived the rise and fall of numerous mob bosses. He had navigated a changing landscape of law enforcement and built an organization that was both feared and respected. But there was one enemy that even Tommy couldn't outmaneuver, and that would be cancer. In 1966, Tommy was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I mean, this guy had survived the bloody gang wars of the 1920s. He made it through the violence of the 1930s. He avoided prosecution when other bosses got locked up, but now he was facing an opponent that he couldn't beat. As his health got worse and worse, Tommy started putting his affairs in order. Unlike a lot of mob bosses who held power until they were forced out, Tommy began a careful transition process. He promoted Carmine Mr. Gribbs Tremonti to acting boss. At the same time, he groomed Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo as his eventual successor. On July 13, 1967, Tommy Lucchese passed away at his home in Lido Beach, Long Island. He was 67 years old. His funeral drew over 1,000 mourners. Politicians showed up, judges came to pay their respect, and businessmen attended in groves. And of course, representatives from all the major crime families came to say goodbye. It was a real testament to respect that he commanded across all sectors of society. Tommy Lucchese was one of the few major mob bosses to die of natural causes, in his own bed, surrounded by family. But what he left behind was a criminal organization that was stable, profitable, and poised to continue without him. So he also left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the underworld. All the businesses he built, all the political connections he forged, and the industries he influenced would continue to bear his imprint long after he was gone. Tommy Lucchese's impact on organized crime in American society can't be overstated. He helped build modern organized crime. He transformed street gangs into sophisticated criminal enterprises, and he showed them how to get their hooks into legitimate businesses. The Lucchese crime family continued to be a major force in New York's underworld for decades, even after his death. That is a real testament to the solid foundation that he built. But Tommy's most lasting legacy might be in his business model. He understood way before many of his contemporaries that the real money wasn't in traditional rackets, like gambling and loan sharking. It was in controlling industries like trucking, garment manufacturing, and construction. Tommy infiltrated labor unions. This gave him some pretty massive power. He could tax every dress made in New York's garment district. He got a cut from every load delivered by a union truck, and he profited from every building constructed with union labor. This approach became the template for how organized crime would operate in the decades that followed. Tommy created a new image for mob bosses. He showed them how to be business leaders. He demonstrated the value of being a community figure. He donated generously to Catholic charities. He supported local community projects, and he always maintained the appearance of a respectable businessman. This dual identity, criminal boss and community leader, would later be adopted by mob figures from New York to Chicago to Las Vegas. In the decades after Tommy's death, the Lucchese family faced challenges from law enforcement, rival families, and internal power struggles. The RICO Act, passed in 1970, gave prosecutors a powerful new tool to go after organized crime. And later, the Lucchese family leaders weren't doing so good. Tony Dux Corallo faced prosecution. Vic Amuso got hit with a lengthy prison sentence. For some reason, they just couldn't match Tommy's ability to stay out of trouble. The family's power would diminish from its height during Tommy's reign, although it still remains active today. But even as the influence of Mafia has waned in American society, Tommy Lucchese's story remains pretty relevant. His rise from a poor immigrant with a mangled hand to one of the most powerful men in the country is, in a way, a distorted version of the American dream. Tommy understood something deep about power. He knew it wasn't about violence. It wasn't about intimidation. It was about connections. It was about influence. These lessons extended far beyond the criminal underworld. So now, while Tommy Lucchese may not be as famous as some of his contemporaries, his impact on organized crime and American business was profound and pretty long-lasting. The little boss with the big ideas helped shape an era and left a legacy that continues to fascinate us more than half a century later, after his death. Next time on Apex Crime Lords, we're going to take a deep dive into the secret world of Chinese triads and their growing influence in America. From traditional strongholds in Chinatown across the country to their expansion into new criminal enterprises, these ancient secret societies have evolved into modern criminal powerhouses. So how did these organizations, with roots in China going back hundreds of years, how are they able to establish footholds in American cities? And what makes their structure and operations different from the Italian Mafia and other criminal groups? And why are law enforcement agencies increasingly concerned about their quiet expansion across the United States? Join us as we're going to pull back the curtain on these shadowy organizations, and we're going to explore how Eastern criminal traditions have found fertile ground on Western soil. You are not going to want to miss this fascinating journey into one of organized crime's most enigmatic powers. Now, when you look back at the life of Tommy Lucchese, you can't help but wonder, what could this guy have achieved if he had chosen a different path? The guy had serious intelligence. His strategic thinking was top-notch. He had amazing people skills. This guy could have been a legitimate business tycoon. He also would have made a good political leader. But instead, he became one of the most successful criminal masterminds of the 20th century. So Tommy's story makes us look at some uncomfortable questions. How did this work? How could a guy run so many countless criminal enterprises, yet still be a respected community figure? How did he manage to be a political power broker and a successful businessman all at the same time? What do you think this says about our society? How could Tommy operate at the highest levels of power for decades? And why did law enforcement even barely touch the guy? And now here's a good one. How many legitimate industries and institutions are still bearing the imprint of Tommy's influence even today? Tommy Lucchese's career went through a long time of massive change in America. He rose to power during Prohibition, and then he built his empire during the Great Depression. He expanded during World War II, and then he reached the height of his influence in the booming 1950s and 60s. But through all these changes, Tommy adapted. He had an uncanny ability to read the times, and he could adjust to new circumstances. The guy was able to reinvent himself over and over. First, he was a street thug. Then he became a bootlegger. Later, he turned into a labor racketeer. And finally, he emerged as a business leader. At each stage, he seemed to understand exactly what was needed to succeed and thrive. In the end, Tommy Lucchese was full of contradictions. He was a criminal, but he built legitimate businesses. He was a power broker, yet he avoided the spotlight. He could order violence when needed, yet everyone knew him for his calm demeanor and diplomatic skills. Maybe that is why his story continues to fascinate us even more than 50 years after his death. In a world that often tries to categorize people as either good or bad, Tommy Lucchese reminds us that the reality is way more complicated. So now how do you think Tommy Lucchese is going to be remembered? Was he a criminal mastermind who corrupted legitimate institutions? Was he a brilliant strategist who built businesses that provided jobs and opportunities? Or was he just a product of his time, as an immigrant who found his own path to success in a society that often offered few legitimate options to people like him? Well, my friends, that is up for you to decide. Let me know what you're thinking in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Really helps us out. Until next time, stay safe and stay dangerous.